Welcome back to Breakthrough Innovation, where we explore how groundbreaking ideas challenge the status quo and reshape entire industries. Today, Preston and I are talking about healthcare innovation with a trailblazer who's bringing modern technology to a centuries old practice. I'm thrilled to welcome Diana Hall, the founder and CEO of ActivArmor, an international biomedical company revolutionizing fracture treatment with 3D printed medical devices. Named Colorado's Manufacturing Woman of the Year and one of the most influential women in 3D printing, Diana is on a mission to move fracture care into the digital age. Her passion for improving patient outcomes through technology is transforming how we think about immobilization. Diana, like I was saying earlier, I love some of the imagery you have for your product. Some of your advocates are amazing. I'm really excited about this conversation because I think you've just got such a great and compelling story. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to speaking about it. My favorite subject.
Yeah. So, and maybe to dive in a little bit, tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to where you are today.
Sure. Well, I'm a chemical engineer. I went to Colorado School of Mines, and then I got a master's degree in business. And I was working in Fortune 500 companies in engineering and then software. And after I took some time off to have my child, I started running a mentoring program for children in poverty, where they would have domestic violence, substandard living conditions, and they would have fractures that they would just get filthy. They couldn't even wash their hands to have a snack. One little girl had bed bugs under hers, etc. So I started developing 3D printed casts to allow them to have a hygienic, sanitizable, waterproof way to heal when they have fractures or when they have injuries. And that's how this all got started.
Well, and it's interesting to me because until I started doing some of the research for this episode, in my head, a cast was a cast, right? It hadn't even occurred to me that this was a real thing because traditional fracture care, I don't know, like 100 years. I'm not even sure what the right time frame is. So what was it like? What was the inflection point that really took you from this is something that I think is an interesting idea to being ready to challenge the status quo in the healthcare industry, which we all know is not an easy thing to do.
100%. And I think it was two things. One, the technology was finally there, which it wasn't before. But the other thing was, too, I think it took an outsider. I think it took somebody in engineering to come into the medical space saying, hey, here's something that can work for this that maybe hadn't been thought of from the inside out. Because, like you said, once you're in that box of, oh, how fracture care is fitted is we take some material out of the drawer and we wet it and we wrap it on you and then you leave and then you saw it off and reapply it for every exam and x-ray. And that's just how they've always done it. So I think the introduction of 3D printing and the advancement of that allowed it to happen, as well as it really did take an engineering and medicine to come together in order to make this happen.
I think to me, what stands out here is the importance of having some of that diversity of thought, not just having all the same people in the room, but bringing people who have different perspectives, even bringing customers or bringing people from completely different industries.
Yeah, the multidisciplinary approach is so necessary for providing really innovative technology and breakthrough types of innovation. Because I mean, for example, had to have orthopedic surgeons on my advisory board, as well as sports medicine physicians, because it can't just be a bunch of engineers. What do we know about medicine? So yeah, so it really took all of it, plus startup founders and people who had experience in bringing biomedical products to market, and the insurance companies, and how to get into the big healthcare networks and things like that. So yeah, there's a lot of expertise that has to come together in order to make something like this successful.
And to some extent, what I hear you saying is to establish trust with your customers. Yeah.
Yeah,
Now,
well, for sure, the KOLs, I mean, like, we use key opinion leaders all the time, and we ask them constantly for their feedback, and those are our real customers at the end of the day, is the doctors.
yeah. Well, and it's interesting to me. I know feedback is one of those tricky subjects, but doctors are maybe notoriously hard to change from a behavior perspective. How was interacting with them as you talked about it, the KOLs? Is that right?
Mhm. Yeah, the
How
key
did
opinion.
Yeah. So how did that affect your engagement with them? And did it make adoption a little bit easier?
Yes. So you have to target the right ones to bring in a new innovation, right? Because, like you said, it's a risk averse group. For obvious reasons. I mean, they want it to be safe and effective. And so a lot of the mainstream orthopedics, and they have established practices and clinical flows that they've done for, like you said, hundreds of years. So to change that, they're going to need a lot of motivation and to make sure that they are comfortable that it is safe and effective. And so that takes time. So the key opinion leaders that we've chosen are the early adopters, the innovators, the folks that are really caring about the best healing outcomes and the best quality of life for their patients. So we started out in sports medicine. I mean, we work with the NFL team doctors, and the Miami Dolphins have a 3D printer right there in their training room. And so we kind of started in that elite athlete space because those guys, they need to be able to shower and sweat in it and, use a bone stimulator, a muscle stimulator, TENS unit, biomonitor. They need to ice bath. They need to do all of those cool things. And they need a low profile device that you can position in any position that you want for whatever your sport is, your activity. And so they really saw it and pushed forward the sports medicine doctors to see that this was like something that needed to change, and they were motivated to do it because of the ability to get their athletes back out onto the field. But then we were able to evolve from that into diabetic foot and Charcot foot, offloading walking boots, pediatrics. You can imagine all the ways that just basic hygiene would be important for patients.
Well, and I'm curious. So you obviously in the beginning had an idea to 3D print a cast. How has that idea? How long have you been doing this? Out of curiosity, 10 years. So over the course of 10 years, how has that idea evolved? Like, what were some of the steps along the way?
Dramatically. So when we first started, we had these $10,000 handheld scanners that you had to be trained for a full day on in order to use. Now we have a free iPhone app. Anybody can use and download it. You can use it. You can watch a video and use it within an hour, and it creates a full color scan of any limb. And then we use the full color 3D scan for the positioning and the shape, and then we use a couple of manual measurements to make for quality control check, as well as to make sure that the fit is what the doctor wants. Give them some autonomy in that. Then we do our custom design, which has to be it's fully custom, but it's also standardized to the point where it's printable and it's functional in all of the ways that it needs to be. I mean, like just some examples, if you can see, and you're not just listening to this, here's a walking boot, and then you can see I have a wrist cock up here and a long arm cast, but you can see how these devices are customized where they can transition down from a long arm cast into a short arm cast during the healing phases. They can come in pieces. You can this has a port for a bone stimulator, so you can put that in. You can offset pins or incisions. So there's a lot of customization you can do, but you also need to maintain the structural integrity of the end product. So we do that through a finite element analysis, making sure that there's enough coverage area, even if they want a big exposure, to make sure that the end product, even though it's custom, is still going to be mechanically sound. And so all of those come into the play, and that's evolved over the last 10 years to the point where now we had centralized manufacturing before. Now everything is done at point of care. The 3D printing is done right there in the orthopedic doctor's office, which makes it cheaper and faster.
So you do the data processing essentially, and then shoot a file back to them to build it.
Right. And there is a user interface now that has been years in development that it's in beta test right now, that they'll be able to do it themselves. So they'll be able to take our whole system and do the design right there on the cloud and generate their own custom files. So yeah, at the end of the day, we are now a software company.
Awesome. What is like as I listen to you talk, what I kind of hear you saying is things have become simple enough that this is not a huge technical challenge anymore.
Well, it can't be because, I mean, orthopedic surgeons would not adopt it if it was. It's a turnkey process now.
So Diana, I'm curious, given what we've been talking about and how this has transitioned from an engineering problem to more of a software problem, and a lot of the technical challenges, I don't want to say are trivial, but they are not necessarily huge challenges anymore. What are you doing to kind of stay safe from a business perspective, to kind of I don't want to say block out competition because that sounds wrong for some reason, but to protect your business?
Sure. No, 100%. And we want it to be accessible to everyone worldwide, right? Because it's an improvement that's going to improve your quality of life. So at the end of the day, we are a for-profit business. We're not a nonprofit, but our mission is to help improve the quality of life for everyone. So the more available it is and accessible to everyone, the better for us. But the way that we make sure that we can get it accessible to everyone is by making our software printer and scanner agnostic. In other words, you can use any 3D scanning technology, any 3D printing technology. We do have a turnkey system that we will put in there, so you don't have to know anything about 3D printing, anything about slicing, or that even exists, or anything about design. And you can just in a clinician's office do a scan. Anyone can do it. A casting tech, a nurse practitioner, whoever can do a scan, visualize the design that they want, customize it, press print, just plug it on a thumb drive right into your printer and press start. And you don't need to know anything about calibrating the equipment. It's all automated. It does it itself. Very little to no maintenance. And it's kind of like running a 2D printer now, where you just have a spool of plastic that you just plug in whatever color you want and press start. And that's how it needed to be in order for it to get mainstream and how we scale. But again, the next 3D printer that comes out, like this right here was a 4-hour print. So that's a long time for a patient to wait for their device. They may have to come in the next day and pick it up. That's not always viable for somebody who might be, driving a long way to get a cast, or, to the emergency room or whatever. So ideally for us, these will pop out in 15 or 20 minutes. That's the goal. But as the next generation of 3D printers comes out, we will implement those. So that's part of how we do it, is we make sure that we are open to advances in 3D printing and advances in new material science, advances in scanning technologies, and we evolve with that. And our software and our designs will work clinically based on changes and advancements in those areas.
So I guess I'm hearing it from two perspectives. I'm hearing, one, that you are rapidly adopting any new technology, but two, that you're making it so that it's as simple as possible for users to use. So I imagine that you've actually made a fairly high bar for any competitor, because they have to now compete against all the stuff that you've learned. They have to compete against how fast you can adopt and change.
Right. And that's why it's so competitive in 3D printing space and so competitive in the 3D scanning space and all of those other spaces. For us, we are bringing a whole system together that's a plug and play system. And the system can change with the advancements in technology, but still have it be a system that works clinically. Like the patients will have good healing outcomes, and the product, the designs have been proven, and all of that. So that the clinicians don't have to worry about all of those little details from end to end and splice them all together and try to kludgy make something work.
So I think the next topic I really want to hit on, and I want to jump to this because I think it's important to hit before we wrap up. Given how far you've come and everything you've done and all the innovation you've done to date, what's the next challenge? What's the next thing that you haven't solved yet?
Well, again, it's going to be, how do we become the standard of care? And that means changing the culture, like you mentioned before, making sure that it's just as cheap and affordable, and that it's just as fast. And we already know that the healing outcomes are better and that the product works better. So now our two challenges are to make it just as cheap as traditional casting materials and just as quick. And those are our two challenges. And then it's just about, sales, like making sure that the end users are comfortable enough, which I'm talking about, the physicians are comfortable enough with the technology and the process and the procedure, that they will make it their standard of care. And that's a culture change. And that takes some marketing and sales effort, as you can imagine.
Well, what I love about that is we tend to think about innovation from the perspective of products. And I think it's important for everyone to realize innovation is just as much about culture, process, operations as it is about the product you're building. So I think that's a really good perspective to say, oh, look, our product's in a good spot. Where we have to innovate now is in the culture and ensuring that we can drive change, build acceptance. I think that's
That- And
smart
that's just
approach.
why, yeah, that's why a lot of people, I think, fail as engineers on the technology side. They might have a really cool product, but if you can't bring it to market, if your end users won't adopt it, it doesn't matter. And so I think, and that's why, I don't know if you've seen like some 3D printed casts, they're like a little wispy, spider webby, whatever. And it's like, well, that's great. I'm sure the patients will love that. But no doctor with a patient with a fracture is going to prescribe that if it's not protective at the end of the day. Are we doing everything that the technology can do? No, on purpose, because we're listening to our customer, who is the doctor, not the patient. And I think, and if you were ever going to ask me, like, what mistake did I make? That was the first impression. I thought coming into it, let's see what the end user wants. But the end user is not our customer if it's in fracture care, and it won't be. So you always got to listen to what your find out who your customer is, and then listen to what they have to say, because that's all that matters.
That's
No,
great.
I agree. And I was just about to ask you, what's the one takeaway? But I think you just answered the question. You got to find out who that customer is and be open to the fact that you might be wrong and then listen to what they have to say. Cause I
And they,
agree.
yeah, and that might not be the end user. I mean, your customer may not be the end user if you're B2B, and that makes it a little more difficult. That's why, you're not, if you can't take your product to Shark Tank, or, if it's not just a feel good product where I want to sell it on QVC or whatever, that's going to be a lot harder of a sales process if you're in, medical devices and you need a prescription, or you need to go B2B and all of the things that is the biggest challenge of startup in a space like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Diana, this has been a great conversation and I've loved every minute of it. I think you've got such a great product. It looks great. It works well. It sells itself at this point. I think you're blessed in that regard. I do think we have to wrap up. If someone is interested in collaborating with you, if someone needs an active armor cast, what's the best way for them to reach out and connect with you?
Sure. So we need help in a lot of areas. One, we need patients to demand it from their doctors. So if you are a patient and you need one, you can go to our website, www.activearmor.com. You can email us at info@activearmor.com. You can call our 800 number, 800-583-6690, any way that you want. And then we're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, X, all those, like all of the platforms. Just look for Active Armor. We're also looking for providers who want to bring it into their clinic so that we can send patients there, and you get your logos on them, and they really show you as the innovator and really caring about customer quality of life. So if any providers that want to implement it, we have a turnkey system, and the system is free, the 3D printer and all that, as long as you're using it. So that's a great opportunity for providers. And then the third thing we're looking for is people to help us who are on the inside. So ortho techs, nurse practitioners, MA, anybody who's in orthopedics and works with fracture care, we would love to have you on board as our representatives and making commissions on the side on a product while you're working. I mean, what more can you ask for? So yeah, website, any of our social media, feel free to reach out.
Yeah,
Cool.
you're looking for those cultural change agents.
Yes,
So, Diana, thank you
exactly.
so much. For everyone who's listened all the way to the end, thank you as well. I strongly encourage you to take a moment, share a story about a time where a cast didn't work for you and where active armor would have been the better solution. If you're in orthopedics, maybe share a moment about where you feel like this could have made the difference for a patient. And while you're sharing that, don't forget to leave a rating because we'd love to get that in there as well. Maybe most importantly, though, if you know someone who's had a fracture or someone who is in this area who could benefit from an introduction to Diana and Active Armor, share this episode with them. I think that's one great way for us to pay it forward and expand the value of each episode we do. So, Diana, thank you again. Everyone else who's listened all the way to the end, thank you as well. And we'll see you all next time on Breakthrough Innovation.
Thanks.